Haiti is in a state of political disarray after the country's president, Jovenel Moise, was assassinated at his home. Moise's wife was also critically wounded. Authorities say they've killed 4 subjects, apprehended 2, and are pursuing more. Who organized the assassination and who has the rightful claim to power in Haiti remains uncertain at this moment. And joining us with their perspectives on this evolving situation are Francois Pierre-Louis, a political science professor at Queens College, City University of New York, who specializes in Haitian politics, and Etzer Kantav, president of the DuSable Heritage Association, based right here in Chicago. Welcome both of you here to Chicago tonight. Starting with you, Professor Pierre-Louis, what is the very latest you're hearing about the situation on the ground in Haiti?
Well, the latest we're hearing is a tug of war between the Prime Minister, Claude Joseph, who was fired by President Jovenel a few days ago before he was killed, and then the new Prime Minister, Ariel Henry. Henry claimed that Claude Joseph works for him, whereas Claude Joseph claimed to be the interim president of Haiti. So we are really in a legal and constitutional limbo because there's actually no governing structure. A lot of the members of our Claude Joseph cabinet are in hiding. So basically, we have an exploding situation, and if it is not addressed rapidly, it might deteriorate into a real civil war.
And so there's a complete vacuum of leadership right now and disagreement of who exactly is in charge. Etzer Kantav, what are you hearing from people you know on the ground in Haiti, and what's been the reaction here in Chicago's Haitian American community?
Well, we are all in a state of shock because this is definitely not the way we want to be making history, and this is something that we, and that doesn't sit well with us. And as a matter of fact, tonight we will be having a meeting with a number of organizations to discuss the situation and look at the way forward.
And Professor Pierre-Louis, do you know what we've heard about who these suspects are? They were speaking, and we're talking about the folks that carried out the assassination allegedly. They were speaking Spanish and English. They falsely, we think, claimed to say they were DEA. Are there any clues as to who might be behind this?
Well, first, I would say we don't know, because all this official version is coming from Claude Joseph, from the government itself. There has not been any outside independent investigators or reports about these people. And secondly, I think we have to be careful in how the narrative is going, because these people they are catching in Haiti are not necessarily part of the plot. I've heard the report this morning. I was in meeting with people in Haiti. If you are light-skinned, you have straight hair, you are accused of being a foreigner, a Colombian or a Venezuelan. Therefore, you are accused of being members of the plot of the assassination group that killed the president. So therefore, I think we have to question that. Second thing, we have to realize, they said that there was a Haitian American involved in the assassination, but they refused to name that person. So therefore, there are many things unknown that we haven't known, we don't know about. And I would be very careful about any official statement from the government itself.
So you're saying it's hard to really trust the information that's coming out at this point. Etzer Kantav, you mentioned that groups locally are going to get together to discuss this situation. What should the United States, the Biden administration, the international community be doing here to step in?
Well, we've had a long history of cooperation with the international community, and with the U.S. we've had special bonds going back to the Battle of Savannah in 1779, and we've had Frederick Douglass being a minister resident and consul general of the U.S. to Haiti. So we have strong bonds with the U.S. So I hope that the international community would help us in the investigation and to determine the actual perpetrators and bring them to justice.
Professor Pierre-Louis, can you just give us a sense of the conditions that led up to this assassination? We're talking about a country that's suffering massive rates of poverty, gang violence, the earthquake in 2010. What is life like, and what has life like been in Haiti leading up to this?
Well, if you look at the genesis of this crisis specifically, I would say it was when Secretary of State Hillary Clinton went to Haiti and imposed Michel Martelly as president of Haiti over other candidates. And since then, we've had issues, especially with the corruption. We don't know what happened with the Petro-Caribbean money. It is alleged that President Martelly squandered that money, and his team took that money, which made poverty in Haiti worse. It worsened the poverty in Haiti. Secondly, during the Martelly administration and during the Jovenel administration, there were never midterm elections to replace or renew the elected officials. And that was under the support of US ambassadors. In the past 8 years, we've had 2 ambassadors, American ambassadors in Haiti, and none of them promoted elections. Suddenly, they're promoting now an election so fast, there is no registration of voters, there is no machine, there are no laws, there is no electoral board to have the elections. So therefore, we don't know why the US is pushing and rushing to have an election that everyone is saying is a sham. I think they should give time for the groups to work together to promote a dialogue among all the groups in Haiti to bring calm and peace and bring back the economy, stop the corruption, make sure that the people who are involved in the massacres of people in the slums are arrested and brought to justice, and make sure that the gangs that President Jovenel armed, they are disarmed, and then life can go back to normal.
Well, clearly,
right now,
clearly a political and a humanitarian crisis right now. We're going to have to leave it there. Our thanks to Francois Pierre-Louis and Etzer Kantab for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.